design is that being on a 2D plane, items and enemies can become hidden behind towers, houses and fences as part of the game's attempt to give it the illusion of depth. It can make it really hard to distinguish difficulty.
The rest of the guitar will look and feel very similar to those who've picked up the plastic instrument since Guitar Hero World Tour back in 2008, save for a few things I'll get into later.
Attract attention and open themselves up for exploitation. Armed with this knowledge, you are ready to go online and become awesome.
Hello and welcome to Worldwide Gaming. I'm your host Ryan, and today we have a whole bunch of content ready to show you. Watch out for Jarryd's review of Hero Seige, our top 10 worst spin-off games list, a preview of the newest in Rockstar simulation games Guitar Hero Live, and some tips from Daniel on how to improve your Halo multiplayer game. All that after the forecast.
Enter the Gungeon is an upcoming roguelike twin-stick shooter. The game follows a band of misfits looking to find the Gungeon's ultimate treasure, a gun that can erase their past. With a massive amount of unique guns, bosses, and secrets, this looks like it'll keep us entertained for hours. It's coming to PS4, PC, and Mac in 2015. In this run-and-gun side-scroller, Cuphead, the player must fight a series of bosses to repay a debt to the devil. Drawn in the style of old 1930s cartoons, this is certainly looking to be a unique game. It is releasing for Xbox One and PC this year. Inspired by the SNES era, Anne blends platforming and shoot-'em-up gameplay with some RPG elements. You play as number 25, a robot who has fallen in love with another, Anne. Love is forbidden in the world of robots, so Anne is disassembled and scattered in nearby lands. It's up to you to find her pieces and put her back together this year on Wii U and PC.
Hero Seige is a game in which you die over and over. The premise is quite simple. A group of monks have foolishly united the 4 pieces of the Brimstone Talisman, awakening the slumbering demons below. Your goal is to stop Satan before he raises hell on earth and all mankind becomes extinct. Hero Seige is another entry into the hack-and-slash roguelike library. It borrows from games like The Binding of Isaac with its top-down perspective and separate controls for cardinal movement and attacking. When starting the game, you are given a choice of 8 different character classes to choose from. While they all have a different look and different skill sets, their differences usually boil down to a choice between ranged and melee abilities. Some classes feel really overpowered, especially the ranged ones in the beginning where you can essentially avoid all damage by keeping your distance. Other classes feel overpowered because of their abilities. For example, the Redneck's Molotov, which just tears through enemies regardless of their size and strength. Some classes are noticeably less powerful, meaning you'll need to factor more than their aesthetic appeal into your choice. The enemies in Hero Seige are surprisingly varied and generally follow the theme of the level you're playing through, meaning you'll only see them in that particular stage of the game. While some of the enemies are used extensively in some levels, there's enough variation in size and abilities to make it not feel like the palette swap that some games in the genre are guilty of. Throughout the game you'll find multiple kinds of items to obtain, use and discard. They range from potions that will help you or ruin a run, to items like artifacts that you can actually keep with you from run to run. These can have both negative and positive effects at the same time. The RNG used for the items works well, and doesn't feel as excessive as it can in a game like Sword of the Stars: The Pit, which changes absolutely everything from run to run. Hero Seige's items are varied, but not so much that you don't gain at least a passing familiarity with them after a few runs. The level design is arena-based and fairly straightforward, but includes a nice 16-bit aesthetic and theme to go with each level, from a frozen tundra to a forest reminiscent of older SNES games. Each level includes a ton of hidden items, secret areas, and additional enemies that can help you access those areas, so it can be really worth your time for you to explore the area, even if it appears limited to begin with. My only real complaint with the level design is that being on a 2D plane, items and enemies can become hidden behind towers, houses and fences as part of the game's attempt to give it the illusion of depth. It can make it really hard to distinguish where you're being attacked from, especially if it's in a small area. Hero Seige has a steep difficulty curve when starting out. It can throw you into a run and just flat out punish you, but it's insanely varied as to how each run could pan out. To add to the cruelty, it also features a hardcore mode that adds permadeath, which is just complete insanity given that the game is already incredibly hard. Only the truly masochistic need apply. Controls are fairly straightforward, although much like games such as Risk of Rain, it definitely warrants the use of a gamepad. Keyboard is plausible, but it feels much more natural with pad in hand. The game limits you to 4 directions of movement, but allows the enemy 8, which further adds to the difficulty spike when perspective becomes an issue. Being able to use all 8 directions would likely make quicker dodges and attacks more viable, but would also make the game much easier. While not necessarily a bad thing, the draw for games of this type is often the difficulty, and being limited to the cardinal directions makes sense for this title. Hero Seige features local and online multiplayer, but it requires that you have the Cup of Doom DLC. If you've got some friends who enjoy this sort of game, it can be a real blast getting together and battling the forces of Satan. Spells and abilities will fly and chaos will ensue, but you'll love every second of it. So while Hero Seige isn't really anything new except for some very unique mobs, it doesn't do anything wrong. It takes from other games in the genre and makes for a fairly solid roguelike game that's well supported by the developers. I would definitely recommend checking it out.